It started with a ruthless kick. The sound cracked through Valparaiso's bustling seafood market, startling the gulls circling above the docks. Lena Torres froze, a basket of fresh bread digging into her palms. Just ahead, a man in salt-stained clothes collapsed onto the slick pier, gasping for air as Camila's stiletto heel dug mercilessly into his ribs. "Thief!" Camila's voice cut sharper than the fishmonger's knives. The man coughed, his voice trembling. "I was only returning it." A black leather bag lay between them, wet from the spray of the sea. Lena's stomach twisted. She knew that bag. She knew the lies it carried. Camila bent down, snatched it up, and rifled through it with theatrical precision. Then, smack, her palm slammed into the man's cheek. Again, the crowd flinched but stayed still, their eyes darting away like guilty witnesses. Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. She shoved past the bystanders, stepping into Camila's shadow. What Lena didn't know was that the stranger at her feet wasn't just another dockside drifter. He was the man who could bring down every secret her family had fought to keep buried. And helping him would cost her far more than she could imagine. Lena did not think she moved. The basket of bread dropped from her arms as she knelt beside the man. His breath came in short, painful bursts, and his eyes were glassy with shock. She could see a dark bruise already spreading under the edge of his shirt. Around them the crowd murmured, but no one stepped forward. The smell of fish and diesel hung heavy in the air. Camila crossed her arms and tilted her head, a smirk playing on her lips. "Always defending strays, Lena. You never learn, do you?" She spoke loudly, so the vendors would hear. Some chuckled, others turned away, pretending to mind their business. Lena ignored her. She slid her arm under the man's shoulder. "Can you stand?" she whispered. He nodded faintly, but winced when he tried to move. Lena glanced at the pier's far end where Mateo's small fishing boat rocked in the tide. If they could reach him, they could get away before Camila called the harbor guards. Camila stepped closer, blocking their path. "You think you can just walk off with a thief?" Her perfume was sharp and cloying. The man tried to speak again, but coughed hard. Lena's grip tightened. Mateo must have seen them struggling because he began making his way through the crowd. His weathered face was set in a frown, and his boots slapped against the wet boards. "Move, Camila," he said in a low, steady voice. For a moment she held her ground, then gave a theatrical sigh and stepped aside. Lena and Mateo half carried the man to the boat. The moment they pushed off from the pier, the market noise began to fade, replaced by the steady slap of waves against the hull. The man leaned back against a coil of rope, his eyes closing. "Who is he?" Mateo asked without looking away from the horizon. Lena shook her head. "He says he was returning her bag. That's all I know." She pulled her scarf tighter against the wind. At the small clinic near the outer docks, Lena handed over every coin she had. The nurse's eyes widened when she saw the bruise along the man's ribs and called for the doctor. Lena waited in the dim hallway, the smell of antiseptic sharp in her nose. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of what she had just done. By the time the doctor emerged to say he would live, the sun was dipping behind the hills. Lena stepped outside and saw Mateo already untying his boat. She knew going home meant facing her mother's fury, but leaving him there alone had never been an option. She took a deep breath and climbed in. The ride back to the harbor was quiet except for the creak of wood and the slap of the waves. Lena kept her eyes on the horizon, but her mind was already racing. She could picture her mother's face when she realized the money was gone. That tight frown, the narrowing eyes, and the sharp words that would follow. When Mateo's boat touched the dock, Lena thanked him quickly and hurried along the narrow path that led to the row of old houses by the market. The salty wind had turned cold, and the smell of frying fish from the food stalls only made the knot in her stomach twist tighter. The door to the boarding house was open. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of cheap perfume and boiled coffee. Her mother was waiting in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, her arms folded tight. Camila sat on the table, swinging one leg with a glass of wine in her hand. "Where is the money, Lena?" Her mother's voice was calm, but carried the edge of a blade. Lena opened her mouth, but Camila's laugh cut her off. "She spent it on some bleeding dock rat. I saw her dragging him away like a hero in the movies." "It was for the hospital," Lena said quickly. "He was hurt badly." Her mother's hand slammed against the counter, making the cups rattle. "You used my money on a stranger while we have bills to pay. You think you can play sane in my house?" Before Lena could speak again, Camila slid down from the table and stepped close enough that Lena could. LD smelled the wine on her breath. "He is not just a stranger," she whispered. "I know his face. And if I am right, he is worth more than you can imagine." Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind outside. "What do you mean?" she asked. Camila only smiled. "I have friends who pay very well for certain information. And that man might just be our ticket out of this miserable place." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Lena realized Camila was already planning something dangerous. She also knew that if Camila was right, the stranger from the pier was in more danger than she could have imagined. That night, Lena lay awake listening to the murmur of voices in the next room. She caught fragments about bank accounts and codes and a meeting at the far end of the pier. Every instinct told her she should stay out of it. But the memory of the man coughing and clutching his ribs would not let her rest. Morning came with a sky the color of steel and a sharp wind sweeping in from the Pacific. Lena rose before the others stirring in the house. She dressed quietly and slipped out into the alley, her steps quick on the worn cobblestones. The smell of the sea was stronger than usual and gulls circled high above the harbor. She knew she had to work if she wanted to gather enough to replace the money she had spent. The market was already alive with the noise of vendors unloading crates of fish. Lena joined the line of porters taking jobs from stall to stall, carrying boxes and sacks across the slippery boards. The weight bit into her shoulders, but she welcomed the distraction from the tension at home. By mid-morning, her arms ached and sweat clung to her back despite the chill. She was carrying a bundle of salted cod when a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Watch where you are going." Lena turned and her stomach dropped. Camila stood in front of her dressed in a flowing coat, her hair perfect as ever. Beside her was a tall man with a smug smile who eyed Lena like she was a stray animal. "So this is what you have been doing," Camila said, her tone dripping with contempt. "Lifting fish for pennies." Lena shifted the bundle in her arms, ready to step past, but Camila moved into her path. The tall man whispered something in her ear, and she laughed lightly. Then, without warning, Camila shoved the bundle from Lena's grasp. The salted cod hit the wet boards with a dull thud, scattering into the puddles. "Pick it up," Camila said, her voice low and sharp. "And maybe I will let you finish your day without more trouble." Lena bent to gather the fish, but Camila's boot pressed down hard, grinding them into the wood. The smell of brine rose sharply. "You want my help?" Camila said, leaning close. "Then kneel and beg for it." Lena's cheeks burned. She straightened slowly, the market noise fading as eyes turned toward them. Just as she opened her mouth, a new voice broke through. "That will not be necessary." The crowd parted, and a man in a crisp, white suit stepped forward, his eyes locked on Camila. It took Lena a moment to recognize him. The battered stranger from the pier, now standing tall, his presence commanding the space around him. Camila's smile faltered. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Settling a debt," he said calmly, and the air around them seemed to still. Lena's mind raced as she stared at the man in the white suit. It was impossible to reconcile him with the injured stranger she had helped just a day before. His posture was straight, his gaze unwavering, and there was an unmistakable authority in the way he moved. Camila recovered her composure quickly, tilting her chin upward. "You must have me confused with someone else," she said with a hint of defiance. The man smiled without warmth. "No confusion at all, Camila. You took my bag, you took my money, and you thought no one would notice." His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. A murmur swept through the onlookers. Vendors paused in their work, and even the gulls seemed to quiet. Camila's companion shifted uneasily, glancing at the crowd that was forming. Lena took a step back, unsure of what was about to happen. The man raised his hand slightly, and from the edge of the market a group of men in dark suits appeared, moving with practiced precision. They spread out, blocking every exit from the pier. Camila's eyes darted around. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice tightening. "You have no proof." The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. A large screen on a nearby stall flickered to life, showing clear video of the scene at the market the day before. Every detail was there, Camila striking him, the crowd watching, the stolen bag in her hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The tall man with her took a step back, but two of the suited men closed in, cutting off his escape. Camila's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The man in white stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she and Lena could hear. "I went undercover to find the people stealing from my company. And I found you." One of the men in suits handed him a small folder. Inside were bank statements, transfers, and names. "Evidence." The man nodded and gave a short order. The suited men moved in, and within moments Camila and her companion were restrained. The crowd erupted in whispers and pointing fingers. Some faces showed shock, others satisfaction. The man turned to Lena, his expression softening. "You did not walk away when everyone else did. For that I owe you more than thanks." Lena felt the weight of every watching eye as he gestured for her to follow him away from the chaos. She knew whatever came next would change her life forever. Lena followed the man through the maze of stalls, her heart pounding in her chest. The murmurs of the crowd faded behind them, replaced by the cry of gulls and the steady slap of the tide against the pilings. They stopped beside a sleek black car waiting at the edge of the pier, its polished surface gleaming in the afternoon light. He opened the door for her, but Lena hesitated, glancing back at the market. She could still see Camila struggling against the men in suits, her voice shrill but lost under the noise of the harbor. Lena climbed into the car, feeling the leather seats cool against her palms. Once they were moving, he spoke. "My name is Ethan Vega. I own Vega Technologies. For the past 6 months, my company has been losing sensitive data and millions in assets. Every trail led here to this harbor." Lena listened in silence, trying to connect this powerful figure with the battered man she had carried through the market. "I went undercover to confirm my suspicions," Ethan continued. "That is when I met your stepsister. She made my job easier than I could have hoped." Lena looked out the window as the car climbed the narrow streets away from the water. "What will happen to her?" she asked quietly. "That depends on the authorities," Ethan said. "But theft at this scale leaves little room for mercy." They pulled up in front of the boarding house. From outside the door, Lena could already hear raised voices. Ethan's jaw tightened. He stepped out first, motioning for her to stay behind him. Inside the dim hallway, her mother was shouting, her voice thick with rage. "You think you can humiliate my daughter in front of the entire market?" She was waving her arms, wild with anger. Then she saw Lena, and her fury shifted instantly. "Where have you been?" She crossed the room and grabbed Lena by the arm. Ethan stepped between them, his voice cold. "Let her go." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Her mother's grip loosened under his stare. Lena stepped back, rubbing her arm. "This young woman saved my life," Ethan said evenly. "And from this moment on, she answers to no one here." Her mother's mouth opened, then closed again. The authority in his tone left no space for argument. Ethan turned to Lena. "Pack what you need. You are coming with me. And when you leave this place, you will not look back." Lena stood frozen for a moment, the words settling slowly in her mind. Leaving this house was something she had dreamed of for years, but the sudden reality felt almost unreal. Her mother's eyes narrowed, as if weighing how far she could push back without losing something she wanted. Camila's absence made the room feel strangely empty, but her presence lingered like a shadow in every corner. Ethan waited patiently, his gaze steady on Lena. She swallowed hard, then turned toward the small room at the end of the hall. It did not take long to gather her belongings. A few worn dresses neatly folded in a cloth bag, a pair of shoes, and a faded photograph of her father. When she stepped back into the main room, her mother was leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. "So you think you can walk out and never pay back what you owe me?" She spoke low, but every word was laced with bitterness. Lena met her eyes for the first time in years without looking away. "I don't owe you anything anymore." Her mother's lips tightened into a thin line. Before she could respond, Ethan stepped forward, handing one of his men a small envelope. "Return everything we brought here earlier," he said. "They do not deserve it." The man nodded and left quickly. Her mother's gaze flickered from the envelope to Lena, then back to Ethan, but she said nothing. Outside, the air was cool and carried the faint scent of the sea. Ethan led Lena to the waiting car. Once inside, he leaned back and studied her for a moment. "You are stronger than you realize," he said quietly. "Not many would have stepped in that day at the market." Lena looked out the window as the car pulled away from the narrow street. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a safer place," Ethan replied. "And then I have something to show you." They drove along the coastal road, the late afternoon sun painting the water gold. After nearly an hour, they turned onto a private drive lined with tall palms swaying gently in the breeze. At the end stood a white villa overlooking the ocean, its windows catching the last light of day. When the car stopped, Ethan stepped out and offered his hand to Lena. "Welcome home," he said. "This is where your new life begins." Lena stood at the edge of the drive, the sound of the waves below mingling with the rush of her own heartbeat. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe she might never have to go back. Lena stepped through the wide double doors, and into a space unlike anything she had ever known. Sunlight poured through tall glass windows, washing over polished floors and soft cream walls. The air carried a faint scent of salt and fresh flowers. It felt open and calm, so different from the cramped, dim rooms of the boarding house. Ethan walked ahead of her, showing the way through the main hall. Every room seemed to look out toward the ocean, and she could hear the rhythmic pull of the waves even from inside. They passed a sitting room lined with bookshelves and a terrace where a table was set for two. "This place is yours now," Ethan said, stopping at the terrace. "I wanted you to have somewhere you could feel safe." Lena's fingers brushed the smooth wood of the railing. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. For a moment, she simply looked at the sea, letting the steady motion calm the knot in her chest. Ethan leaned against the railing beside her. "I know you have questions about why I am doing this. The truth is, you showed me something I do not see often. You stepped in when no one else would. That kind of courage deserves more than a thank you." Before she could reply, one of Ethan's men appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we have a situation at the harbor. Camila has been released on bail." Lena turned sharply. "Released how?" The man hesitated. "Someone posted the money within an hour of her arrest. We believe it was arranged before she was taken in." Ethan's expression hardened. "That means she still has connections and resources." He looked at Lena. "You need to be careful. If she blames you for what happened, she will not stop at words." Lena's stomach tightened. She thought of her mother's glare the night she left and the cold edge in Camila's voice whenever she spoke of getting what she wanted. Ethan straightened. "For now, you stay here. I will handle the rest." As evening settled in, Lena stood alone on the terrace, watching the horizon fade from gold to deep blue. The villa felt safe, but her thoughts would not settle. Somewhere out there, Camila was free and moving. And Lena knew deep down that whatever was coming next would test every bit of courage she had left. The night at the villa was quiet, but Lena could not sleep. Every creak of the wooden beams and whisper of wind through the palms felt sharper than it should. She lay awake, staring at the moonlight spilling across the ceiling, and wondered where Camila might be at that moment. Near midnight, she rose from bed and stepped onto the terrace. The sea was dark and endless, the sound of the waves steady but distant. She tried to let the view soothe her, but her thoughts kept circling back to the warning Ethan had given. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway, a phone in his hand. His expression was unreadable. "There's been movement," he said. "Camila was seen near the outer docks 2 hours ago. She wasn't alone." Lena gripped the railing. "What is she doing there?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "We think she's meeting the people who helped her post bail. And they are not just locals." The weight of his words sank in. Lena remembered the fragments she had overheard at the boarding house, bank accounts, codes, a meeting at the pier. She realized Camila might still be pursuing whatever scheme she had been planning before her arrest. Ethan put the phone away. "I have men watching the area, but I don't want you anywhere near it. Until this is over, you stay here." Lena nodded, but inside she felt the pull of something stronger than caution. If Camila was planning to hurt Ethan or take something from him again, she could not sit back and do nothing. Later, when the villa had gone still, Lena walked through the darkened halls to the kitchen. She found Mateo sitting at the table, a mug of coffee in his hand. He had been hired by Ethan that afternoon to help maintain the grounds. "You're awake late," Mateo said quietly. "So are you," Lena replied. He studied her for a moment, then set down the mug. "You're thinking of going to the docks, aren't you?" Lena didn't answer, but he read the truth in her eyes. "If you go, you'll be walking straight into danger," he warned. "I know," she said. "But if I can find out what she's planning, maybe we can stop it before it's too late." The old fisherman sighed deeply. "Then I'm coming with you." Lena managed a faint smile. They would leave before dawn, when the city was still half asleep and the harbor shrouded in fog. The sky was still dark when Lena and Mateo slipped out of the villa. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of salt. They moved quickly along the quiet coastal road, keeping to the shadows. In the distance, the faint glow of the harbor lights shimmered over the water. By the time they reached the outer docks, the first hint of dawn was touching the horizon. Fishing boats bobbed gently at their moorings, and the wooden planks beneath their feet were slick with dew. Lena pulled her scarf higher to hide her face. They kept to the narrow paths between stacked crates until voices reached them. Lena signaled for Mateo to stop. Ahead, near the end of the pier, a small group stood in a loose circle. She recognized Camila instantly, even in the dim light. Her coat was wrapped tightly around her, and she was speaking to two men in dark jackets. Lena strained to listen. One of the men handed Camila a small metal case. She opened it just enough for Lena to catch the gleam of several sleek data drives nestled inside. Camila's smile was quick but satisfied. "This is everything you promised," she said. "The transfer will be complete once I'm in position." Mateo's hand touched Lena's arm. "We should leave now before they see us." But Lena shook her head. "If they get away with that, Ethan will lose more than money." Just then, one of the men glanced over his shoulder. His eyes swept the shadows where they hid. Lena's breath caught. The man said something low to Camila, who stiffened and turned slowly toward their direction. Lena grabbed Mateo's hand and pulled him behind a stack of barrels. Footsteps approached. She could hear them moving closer, the scrape of boots against wet wood. A sudden shout broke the tension. From the far side of the pier, a sharp command rang out, and heavy footsteps pounded across the boards. Camila cursed under her breath. In seconds, the pier erupted into chaos. Men in dark suits surged in from both ends, cutting off escape. Lena caught sight of Ethan at the center of the advance, his eyes locked on Camila. Her stepsister's expression shifted from shock to fury. She clutched the metal case tight, but two of Ethan's men were already closing in. Mateo leaned toward Lena. "Looks like your part is over." But Lena knew it wasn't. If Camila had come this far, she wouldn't give up without a fight. The air on the pier felt charged as Ethan's men closed the gap. Camila stepped back until her heels were almost hanging over the edge of the dock. Her eyes flicked between the two suited men approaching and Ethan himself striding steadily forward. The early light caught the water below, turning it into a sheet of rippling silver. "Give me the case." Ethan's voice was calm, but it carried enough force to make the nearby gulls scatter. Camila's grip on the metal case tightened. "Do you think I will just hand this over?" She gave a short laugh, though her voice trembled. "You have no idea what I had to do to get it." Ethan stopped a few steps away. "I know exactly what you did, and I know every name connected to you." For a moment, there was only the sound of the waves slapping against the pilings. Then Camila's eyes narrowed, and she swung the case up as if to throw it into the water. One of Ethan's men lunged forward, grabbing her wrist before she could release it. The case clattered onto the planks. "That was your last mistake," Ethan said quietly. The men restrained her quickly while another retrieved the case. One of the drives had slipped loose and rolled toward the edge, but Mateo darted forward and caught it just before it fell. Lena stepped out from the shadows. Camila's gaze locked on her, and the anger there was sharper than any insult. "This is your doing," Camila hissed. "You think he will protect you forever?" Ethan turned his attention to Lena. "You should go back to the villa. This part is finished." But Lena shook her head. She wanted to see it through. Ethan gave a small nod and signaled to his men. Within minutes, Camila and her associates were being led away down the pier toward waiting vehicles. As the tension ebbed, Lena realized her hands were still clenched into fists. Ethan glanced at her and offered a faint smile. "You handled yourself well." She managed a nod. "What happens now?" "Now," Ethan said, "we make sure none of this can happen again. The data will be secured, and the people behind her will answer for what they have done." They walked off the pier together, the sun breaking fully over the horizon. For the first time, Lena felt the weight of the past days begin to lift, but she knew the story between her and Camila was not truly over. The ride back to the villa was quiet except for the low hum of the engine. Lena sat by the window watching the coastal road unwind beside the glittering sea. The morning sun was climbing higher, but her thoughts stayed fixed on Camila's face and the venom in her words. Even with the case recovered and the drive secured, she felt no certainty that the danger had passed. Ethan was on his phone speaking in clipped tones to someone on the other end. When he ended the call, he glanced at her. "The data is safe now, but we still have to deal with the network behind her." Camila was just one piece. Lena nodded, though a knot tightened in her stomach. If there were more people like the ones on the pier, then the fight was far from finished. At the villa, Ethan's men carried the case inside and disappeared into one of the side rooms. Ethan led Lena to the terrace where the sea breeze was warm against their faces. "You should know," he said, "what you did today took courage. Many people would have run." "I only did what felt right," Lena replied. But she hesitated before adding, "I do not think Camila will stop." Ethan's expression darkened. "She will try again if she sees an opening. That is why you will not face her alone." They were interrupted by Mateo, who came hurrying up the steps, a folded newspaper in his hand. He laid it on the table between them. The front page carried a grainy photograph of the pier taken that morning. The headline spoke of a major arrest linked to international data theft. The report names Camila Vega. Lena read quietly. She felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Seeing her sister's name in print made it all feel more real and more permanent. Mateo poured them each a cup of coffee. "This will reach her friends by noon," he said. "If they want the rest of what she had, they will have to come for it." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze on the horizon. "Then we will be ready for them." Lena wrapped her hands around the warm cup and tried to steady her thoughts. The villa felt safe for now, but she could not shake the sense that the calm would not last. Somewhere beyond the waves, trouble was already moving toward them. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low, casting a golden path across the waves. The villa seemed calm, but Lena could not shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over her since morning. She walked along the terrace, listening to the distant call of gulls, when she noticed a black car parked just beyond the front gate. It had not been there earlier. Before she could say anything, Ethan stepped out onto the terrace, his phone pressed to his ear. He spotted the car instantly, and his expression sharpened. "Stay here," he told her before striding toward the gate. Lena watched him go, her pulse quickening. From where she stood, she could see two men inside the car, their faces hidden in shadow. They spoke briefly with Ethan, then one of them passed him a sealed envelope through the window. Without another word, the car rolled away, disappearing down the coastal road. Ethan returned slowly, the envelope in his hand. He laid it on the table and slid it toward her. "It has your name on it." Lena hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines written in Camila's handwriting. "You think this is over? I have friends you cannot touch. I will see you again soon." The words felt cold in her hands. She looked up at Ethan. "She is threatening me." Ethan's gaze was steady. "It is a warning and a challenge. She wants you to be afraid." Lena folded the paper carefully and set it down. "I am not afraid," she said, though she could feel the weight of the lie in her chest. That night, as the villa settled into silence, Lena stood by her bedroom window, watching the moonlit water. Somewhere out there, Camila was free, plotting her next move. The envelope was proof that she had no intention of disappearing quietly. Ethan's voice came from the doorway. "When she comes back, we will be ready. But you need to decide something now. Do you want to keep running from her or stand and fight?" Lena turned from the window, meeting his eyes. "I am tired of running." Ethan nodded once. "Then we prepare." The waves crashed against the rocks below, carrying the promise of a storm. Lena knew the calm she had found here was only temporary, and the real battle was still ahead. The morning came with a restless wind that rattled the shutters of the villa. Lena rose early, her mind still fixed on the note from Camila. The air felt heavy, as if the day itself carried a warning. She joined Ethan on the terrace, where he stood watching the horizon, his phone on the table beside him. "We moved today," he said without turning. "I have word that Camila's backers are gathering at the old shipyard. If we act now, we end this." Lena felt her pulse quicken. She had imagined this moment, but the thought of facing Camila again tightened her chest. Ethan seemed to read her hesitation. "You do not have to come." "I am coming," she said firmly. An hour later, they arrived at the shipyard. The place was a maze of rusting cranes and abandoned warehouses. Ethan's men moved in with quiet precision, surrounding the main building. From inside came the faint echo of voices. Ethan pushed the door open. Camila stood at the far end of the room, a metal briefcase on the table before her. Two men flanked her, but their confidence faltered when they saw the number of people entering. "You never could mind your own business," Camila said, her eyes locking on Lena. "This ends now," Ethan replied. His men stepped forward, securing the room. One of them opened the briefcase, revealing bundles of currency and another set of data drives. Camila's defiance cracked for a moment, then returned. "You think this changes anything?" She glared at Lena. "I will find a way back." "No, you won't," Lena answered, her voice steady. "Not this time." The police arrived minutes later, taking Camila and her associates into custody. The briefcase and drives were sealed as evidence. Lena stood in the doorway, watching as her sister was led away, her expression unreadable. Back at the villa, the weight on her shoulders began to lift. Ethan called her to the terrace once more. "This chapter of your life is over," he said. "You have a choice now. You can stay here, start fresh, or go anywhere you wish." Lena looked out at the ocean, the sun breaking through the clouds. For the first time in years, she felt the pull of possibility. "I think I will stay," she said. Ethan smiled. "Then welcome to your new life." And to you watching this, what would you have done in Lena's place? Would you have faced someone like Camila or walked away? Tell us your thoughts. The next morning, the villa was bathed in soft light. The air smelled of salt and blooming jasmine from the garden. Lena stood on the terrace, a cup of coffee warming her hands as she looked out over the ocean. For the first time in years, she felt no weight pressing down on her shoulders. Ethan joined her, leaning on the railing. "It is strange how quickly things can change," he said. "Just a few days ago, I was pretending to be someone I am not, and you were still stuck in that boarding house." Lena smiled faintly. "And now Camila is gone, and the harbor feels different." He nodded. "The authorities have taken her to the capital. She will face trial for everything. It will be a long sentence." A small part of Lena felt a lingering sadness, but it was quickly replaced by relief. She thought of the frightened man on the pier and how stepping forward that day had set everything in motion. Ethan turned to her. "You made a choice when everyone else looked away. That kind of courage is rare." They walked through the villa's garden in silence, listening to the rustle of palm leaves. Lena stopped by a stone bench where the sunlight broke through the branches. "I think I finally understand," she said softly. "Understand what?" Ethan asked. "That sometimes doing what is right will cost you, but it will also give you more than you ever imagined." He gave a small smile. "Then you have already won more than you know." As the day went on, the villa filled with warmth and quiet laughter. Lena began arranging her new room, unpacking the few belongings she had brought. The photograph of her father found a place by the window. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, not just in her story, but in who she was becoming. Life lesson. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Standing up for what is right may come with hardship, yet it often opens doors to freedom, respect, and a future worth living. Thank you for staying with Lena's journey until the very end. Your time and attention mean more than words can express. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in Lena's place on that day at the market, would you have stepped forward to defend a stranger, or walked away? Would you take the risk knowing it could change everything?